tutorial, we're going to be making a custom inspector with tabs. So just like this, you can see on each tab there's different variables, different stuff being shown in the custom inspector. So this is an advanced tutorial for Unity editor scripting and creating a custom inspector that has tabs on it like this. Now real quick before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over on Patreon, everyone who's supporting the channel. Your support really helps a lot and it makes this channel possible, so thank you. I've put a link in the description to Patreon, and if you want to support the channel, please go there. Now let's get going on this inspector. So in order to do this, we're going to have to, well, we're going to use GUILayout.Toolbar, and you can see here the toolbar kind of looks like this, but in the inspector it looks really nice. So let's open up a brand new Unity project and write the script. Okay, so I'm using Unity 5.6.2 F1, and I'm going to go ahead and make the make a new script. I guess that's what we're going to need to do. We won't be doing much in the scene, so let me just create a new C# script, and I'll call this tab example. All right, and then we're also going to need an editor script, so I'm going to create a folder called editor, and then inside of the editor folder we'll create a new script, and this will be called tab example editor. Alright, so we have tab example, and then in the editor folder we have tab example editor. Tab example editor is not going to extend mono behavior. We're going to make it extend editor, not assembly no, editor. We're going to have to say using Unity editor. Okay, so now that we've done that, we could say that this is the type of editor. Alright, so now we're going to need to put the tag at the top that says custom inspector. No, sorry, custom editor, and that is type of, and we're going to have to pass in our class, which is tab example. So this tells it that it is a custom editor. We're going to make a custom inspector for the tab example class. We're not going to use the start or update functions, so I'll delete those now. And we'll put one function in here, which is going to be public override void on inspector GUI. And it's not going to draw anything in the inspector, so we'll say draw default inspector. That's going to just make it do the default Unity editor. So let's make a new game object into the scene, and we'll just add a component on here called tab example. Alright, so tab example, and we could see that it's actually I guess we'll get rid of one of those lines. It was drawn as script twice, so we're gonna draw the default inspector. For now, we're gonna stop that here in a minute, but we have our basic script set up now. What I'm gonna do on the tab example is this is going to be some class with just probably a bunch of variables on it, because that's why we have multiple tabs. So I'll just do string, and we'll do string vars, string var 1. Okay, so we have a string variable, and then let's make 5 of these. Alright, so I have 5 string variables, 5 integer variables. So if I go look at the inspector now, we could see that there's the string and there's the integer variables. And I want to split those off into separate tabs. So let's go ahead and go to the editor script. And first of all, if we look at the GUILayout.Toolbar, we'll see that it returns an integer, the index of the selected button. So we know we're going to need an integer to keep track of which tab is currently selected. So to do that, we're going to create the variable on the tab example script itself, not in the editor script, and then we'll make sure this variable is serialized so that it saves between play and pause mode, or play and editor mode. So I'm going to make a private integer, and I'm going to call it current tab. And the current tab, we're going to want to say serialize field. So we serialize the, because it's private, we need to make sure that we serialize it. And we're going to serialize an integer for the current tab. So now that we have an integer, we will need to reference this integer from our script. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a reference to the target class, the tab example class that's attached to this inspector. So I like to call that one my target, and that's going to be the type of tab example. I'm going to call that my target. So the tab example, my target, that's referencing this script, which is currently open. And if we have access to that, then we can access the current tab field. Now we're going to need to populate this variable, so we're going to say private void on enable, and on enable is of course just like the start. And so what we're going to say here is my target is equal to, and we're going to cast the type of tab example, and then we're going to say target. Now this target word is because we're an editor, it knows the target is whatever script this custom inspector is attached to. So now we've populated my target with whatever script this inspector is attached to. That means that we could say my target dot and access its variables. But we're going to need to make the variable public. So I'm going to go back to tab example and make this field public. Now, public variables are serialized by default. So I could take away the serialized field here. And if I don't want it to be seen in the inspector, I could say hide in inspector, so we don't see that current tab. But now I can access my target dot current tab, which is an integer. So when we call this GUILayout.Toolbar, we could see that it returns an integer. So we're going to say the integer that we created, my target current tab, is equal to, and now we're going to do the GUILayout.Toolbar. And the GUILayout.Toolbar, you can see here what it needs, but we're going to need to pass in an integer of the selected. So this is the button that the user has clicked on to change the tab. So that again is going to be my target.current tab. And then we're going to need to pass in some GUI content or some string text. So I'm going to do a string text. I'm going to say new string, and it's an array. So we're going to need the name of all the buttons. So I could say button 1 and 2, 3, 4. All right, so we have the 4 buttons here, and let's see what happens if we go back to Unity and look at the inspector. All right, we have the 4 buttons, and we're able to change between them because it's changing the integer that is in the tab example called current tab. All right, so we're switching between the tabs, but nothing else other than that is happening. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to go ahead and take away the draw default inspector. And that's going to make all of these disappear because those are all part of the default inspector. So if I want to get those to show show manually, I'm going to need a serialized property for each variable. So I'm going to say private serialized property, and I'm just going to use the same exact name of the variables over here. So it's going to be string var1, and that's going to be the same for all 5 of the variables. And I want private serialized properties for all of the other variables that I want to show into my custom inspector. So I'm going to make 5 more serialized properties for the integers. And the next thing we need to do is get access to the serialized object. And the serialized object, again, is this script. But there is a class itself called serialized object. So we're going to say private serialized object, and that is going to be the serialized object target. So the tab example is called my target. That gives us access to that script specifically. But if we need access to the serialized object, we're going to use SO target, and SO stands for serialized object. All right, so now that we have access to the serialized object, we have the serialized properties available. Now we're going to need to populate those in the onEnable script. So in onEnable, we're going to need to say string var1 is equal to, and we could say so target dot find property, and then we're just going to pass in the name of the string itself, which again is string var1, and it's going to go and find that serialized property. Now I'm going to need to do this again 5 times each. And then for each of the integer vars, we're going to need to go find those. Alright, so now that I have access to all the serialized properties, I can go ahead and draw those in the inspector. And to draw one of these properties, we're just going to call editor GUI layout, and we're going to say property field. And for the property field, we just need to pass in the name of our variable like that. So if I do this for 1, 2, 3, and we go back to the inspector, we should see that we're going to get some errors. Alright, so I have all the variables being populated. It's finding them all. The last thing we're going to need to do is populate this variable onEnable. So we're going to say so target is equal to, and we're going to say new serialized object, and we're going to pass in target right there. So when it enables, we've got our serialized object, we're finding all the properties, and then we're going to draw string variable 1, 2, and 3. Let's go back to the inspector and see what we got. I could see I've made a big mistake. All my variables here needed updated. Okay, now that I've got that fixed, I'm going to go back to the inspector and take a look. There we go. We have string var 1, 2, and 3, and the tabs up at the top. Now the tabs up at the top aren't doing anything, but that's all right. Let's keep going. We have all of our properties being drawn. This time I'm going to draw all of the strings and all of the integers. Alright, so in the inspector we should see all 10 variables again. There they are. And we're not drawing the default inspector. We're drawing all of those properties on our own. So now we can go ahead and say, I'm going to put a switch in here. I'm going to say switch, and we're going to say myTarget.currentTab. Now in the case of it being 0, which is going to be the first tab, we are going to do drawing of the string variables. So I'm going to cut all these. I'm going to put them into case 0, and we need a break there at the end. And then case 1, which is going to be the second tab, This is going to be all the code that we want to run in case the second tab is selected. So if the second tab is selected, we're going to show all of the integer variables, and then we're going to break there. So let's go back to the inspector, and we should see that on button number 1, string variables are shown, and on button 2, the integer variables are shown. Now I'm going to show you a little problem here. Let's say I'm on tab 1 and I type something into the string variable, and then I click on button number 2. You're going to see I'm in an integer field, and it shows that it says hi, because that's where this is like active, and when I switch the button over to it never clears, so this stays exactly the same. Now if I press tab, it's going to go back to 0, but it is kind of a problem right there. So to fix this, what I'm going to do is go back here, and we're going to do a begin change check here. So I'm going to say editor GUI, and I'm going to say begin change check. So it's going to be watching for any changes, and then we're going to need to end the change check. And we're going to do that down here. So I'm going to say if editor GUI dot end change check, because that returns a boolean bool in change check. So if there was a change, we're going to want to, first of all, we're going to want to apply the modified properties to the serialized object. So, and before that, we're going to need to update it. So I'm going to go over to the Unity scripting API. I see the serialized object, and I see the function here, update, which updates the serialized object's representation. So when the inspector draws, the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to say serialized target, and we're going to say update. So update the serialized target's representation, and then we're going to begin a change check, and we're going to be watching for any changes that happen to the serialized object. Now if they change the current tab, that's going to be a change to the serialized object. So here we'll have the editor GUI end change check, and what we want to do here is we're going to want to do serialized target dot apply modified properties. We know we need to save the apply the modified properties because there's been changes. And then what we're going to say here is GUI dot focus control is equal to null. Now the focus control, of course, is that field that we had selected right here, and so I said hi, and I could see that as soon as I press H, it deselects that field. And the reason why is because it's detecting an editor change, and so it's setting the focus control to null. So in order to fix this, we're going to split up the editor change check into 2 parts. First, we're going to check if the user has clicked on one of the buttons, and the second part we're going to check is if the user changed any of the values in the variables themselves. Now in order to do this, we're going to need to add one new variable. So I'm going to go back over to the tab example class, and this is going to be a public integer, or it could be a string if you want it to. So for the sake of clarity, I'm going to use a string, and I'm going to call this current tab. Now that's exactly what my integer was named, so I'm going to need to rename the integer. The integer is going to be renamed to, I'll just call it toolbar tab. So the toolbar tab is keeping track of this toolbar specifically and which tab is open. And the string current tab is going to be a string value that we save where we name our own tabs. And this is going to make more sense right now. The toolbar needs to get changed from my target dot toolbar tab. And so my target dot toolbar tab is equal to the GUILayout.Toolbar, my target toolbar tab. And then what we're going to do here is set a string. So instead of drawing all of the variables right here, we're going to do this later. So I'm going to move these down here. And when you select the first button, and all we're going to do here is set the string value of the currently opened tab. So we're going to say myTarget.currentTab is equal to, and here we could put a name in. So this is just going to be up to you. I guess I'm going to put current tab. We'll call this one strings. And that means I should rename the tabs themselves. Strings, integers. And then after that, I'm not sure what it's going to be. It's going to be tab 3 and tab 4. So I'm going to go down and just set the myTarget.currentTab string to whichever button the user has pressed on. And the other thing I'm going to need to change is this check right here, myTarget.Toolbar tab. We're going to need to switch through the actual toolbar tab here. And we're going to need to do the same thing for all of the buttons. So we're going to do a case 2 and a case 3. And in case you click on those, it's just going to set the current tab to whichever tab you've set. Now, this is helpful because all we've done is we've started a change check. We've checked to see which tab the user's clicked on. And that's all that we've checked for. Now we've ended our change check. We're applying the modified properties, and we're setting the focus control to none. So now we know right here in this section if the user has only changed a tab. And if they've changed a tab, we want to set the focus control to none, to null. So now we can actually go through and draw the properties without making the value reset every time we type a character in. So now that we know what the current tab is, we're going to do another switch on that. It's going to be switch myTarget.currentTab this time instead of toolbar tab. And we're going to go through and we're going to say case, and strings is one of them. So in case it's strings, this is what we want to do. And we want to, of course, draw the strings property and do a break. And we'll do the same exact thing for the other tabs. So in case the current tab is integers, then we want to draw all the integer properties. And of course, if it's going to be the last two tabs, we don't have much to do but break. So that's going to be tab 3. And tab number 4. We're just going to break out of there because we don't have anything to draw yet. Okay, so there's still an editor change check we need to watch for. I'm going to do a begin a change check now before we draw the content, and then we're going to end the change check at the end of that. The only thing we're going to change is we don't want to lose focus control at the end of this one, because this change check means that the user's actually changing some of the properties to the variables themselves. And if that's the case, we don't want to set it to null, because we'll have the problem like I did before when I was trying to type hi and it kept deselecting the box for me. So now I should be able to type hi, and I can type as much as I want there. And if I switch to tab number 2, integers, you're going to see that my focus has been lost. So it doesn't remain selected into this field. Now, it's not very hard from here if you want to implement a second toolbar. What you could do to do that is just draw a second toolbar. So instead of drawing one, you're going to draw 2 toolbars, and you're going to do a switch right after each one. So to keep track of which toolbar is being clicked on. So now I'm going to do another toolbar, but this time it's going to be toolbar top and toolbar bottom. So I'm going to say toolbar tab, let's just say toolbar top, and we'll say toolbar bottom. And now I'm going to have the errors here because I've changed the name of my variable yet again. Alright, so I have the toolbar top, and then I'm going to have the toolbar bottom. So I'm going to change all these to bottom, and then we're going to need to do a switch for all of those ones. Except these are going to be called tab 5, tab 6, 7, and 8. Alright, so now we're going to switch through all of these and set the string current tab to whichever tab the user's clicked on. So we're going to do a switch my target toolbar bottom, and if they clicked on the first one, it's going to be tab 5, the second one's going to be tab 6, tab 7, and tab 8. Alright, so now if we go back to Unity, we're going to see that we have the two toolbars, but you can click individual buttons on each one, so everything is kind of broken at this moment. Let's go back into the script and get this fixed. The way that we're going to fix that is every time you click on a tab button, we're going to set the other tab to 5. And there isn't 5 tabs, so there won't be any tabs selected. So all we're going to do here is we're going to say my target dot toolbar bottom is equal to 4. So if I click on a button on the top, I'm setting the bottom toolbar to option number 4. Now there's only 3 because there's 0, 1, 2, 3 tabs. There's 4, but it starts at 0. So if I say 4, that's the 5th tab, and there's not 5 tabs, so nothing will be selected. So I'm setting the current toolbar on the opposite toolbar, the bottom one. If you click on the top, it's going to set the bottom one to toolbar number 4. And then the same goes for the bottom. If you click on the bottom, it's going to set the top toolbar to toolbar number 4, which doesn't exist, so that won't show. So back in the Unity Inspector now, I can see that I have the strings, integers, tab 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're all individual tabs that act like one big toolbar, but it's 2 separate ones. And we can also select into the text, go to a new tab. It doesn't carry that data over. And now we have our 8 tabs with custom content being drawn onto each one. So I hope this tutorial helps you out. If it does, give it a like, subscribe, put a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on the tutorial and if this is helpful. I'll see you guys in the next video.